James Richardson. Paul Jackson.
Here.
Gary Lambert.
Present.
Carrie Lee.
Here.
Sue Baker.
Here.
Gregory McKay.
Here.
And Will Geddes.
For the Attorney General's office here.
Sir, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. He is running late too. All righty. I'm getting scolded already for not turning on my mic. All right. Do we have any public comments? Seeing none, we're going to move on to agenda item number 5. Number 5, meeting minutes. Secretary, do you have the minutes? I believe it's from the November meeting, the December 5th, and which was a committee meeting, and December 12th. Everybody's been supplied with those, correct? Correct. We've all seen them? All right, let's deal with the November meeting. Does anybody have any changes, adds, anything? No? Seeing none. The December 5th meeting? December 12th. You are making my job very easy today, gentlemen and lady. All right, I will accept a motion.
Motion to approve. Commissioner Lee.
Thank you, Commissioner Lee. Is there a second?
Commissioner Elmore will second.
All right, any discussion? Without further ado, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? All right, that is approved unanimously. Item number 6, for discussion only, DMV report. Mr. McDonald, please come front and center. Thank you, sir. Please state your name for the record. Or names, I'm sorry.
Certainly. Good morning, Chairman Jackson, member of the committee. My name is Sean McDonald. I'm the administrator over the Central Services and Records Division of the Department of Motor Vehicles. With me is Doreen Rigsby, Manager 2 for Central Services.
All right, sir. Would you like to go ahead with your report?
Certainly. Okay, as of yesterday, total registrations processed by the department were 35,817 since go live on July 1st, 2012. Of that 35,817, 3,812 are renewals, so roughly 11% so far this year. And 213 were duplicates, just to throw a number there for you. The total titles that we have processed since go live is 11,650. And presently, our unit is maintaining a one-day turnaround. So as we get it within one day, we mail everything back. I can also provide you with revenue if you would like.
Please.
Of course, we do our revenue projections bi-monthly. So the close of today, we would have the new ones, but I can give you as of January 15th. As of January 15th, 2014, this fiscal year to date, the department has collected on behalf of the commission $405,280.
And how much is in the pipeline? How much we should be getting back to the 15th?
I imagine the 15th is probably that. I don't know if that's come through yet or
This
not.
Commissioner Cox, that has come through.
Okay.
Okay.
Excellent, excellent. And of course, the new numbers will be in at the close of business today, so there would be another check forthcoming.
And how much was the, maybe,
The check, I'm sorry, what was the question?
how much was the check for we received for the 15th?
$15,453.
That's considerably lower than the normal checks, is that correct, sir?
Could you please repeat that number?
$15,453. Yes, at the end of last year, typically we were receiving about $50,000 a month. So far in January, it's 29,000, let's say.
Okay. Ms. McDonald, I'd heard there was some issue with renewals. There was a slowdown in renewals.
Doreen Rigsby, for the record. We have not had a lot of renewals. As Sean had stated earlier, it's about 11% of what was originally registered since the program went live.
Okay, terrific. Any thoughts on why the renewals? I mean, and again, I understand that's not your bailiwick or department, but I mean, just if you had any complaints or anything that came up.
I can probably answer the first part of that, and I might defer to Doreen on the second part. The one thing I would say with the renewals is, obviously, with that first year, it wasn't a mandated compliance thing. So I think initially we saw a bit of a spike towards the end of last fiscal year when people were starting to register. So in short, it was kind of slow. People didn't automatically out of the gate start registering their OHVs until the end of the first fiscal year. So I imagine these renewal percentages, and I've been kind of tracking that as the renewal percentages relative to total registrations, and I have seen that number steadily climb. Again, we're only about 11% right now, but it wasn't that long ago that we were only at 6%. So as we get closer to the end of this current fiscal year, I imagine we'll start seeing a spike, because obviously the last several months of any given year is when I think we'll see a bubble of people renewing from the first go-round.
Oh, terrific. I will look to the commission. Does anybody have any questions of Mr. McDonald? I'm seeing none. Mr. McDonald, can you give us I know that you were kind enough to send us all an email on the intentions of the DMV, your boss, obviously. Can you give us any kind of update on that?
Certainly. As the memorandum that I had sent out, the department has put forth a proposal to look at basically trying to do an enterprise business fund type model as far as the registrations or as far as revenues are concerned with the program. This would take collective revenues from both titles and from registrations and would basically give us enough to typical business model, total revenue minus its expenses. Once the expenses were paid, the difference would be distributed. And again, this is a collective across all spectrums. So it would include title revenue, which right now the department maintains 100%. So title revenue as well as registration revenue. We would just keep enough to sustain the program, which we are currently operating with only 3 full-time personnel, cost allocating management, and then the difference would go through. But again, if the commission itself had something that they wanted to entertain, I could certainly take that back to the department.
Thank you. Mr. Lambert, you had a question?
I do. What percentage of the monies do you track what you bring in on title as compared to, and how much your labor is on title as compared to registration and sticker programs? And how are your numbers there look? I mean, is titling paying its own way, or are you spending more than you're bringing in?
Right now, I think, and to maybe help answer that question, we have been watching our title counts, and I will say that our title counts are a little bit higher than we anticipated over the last couple of months, so that's a good sign. However, titling is a one-stop process too, and we imagine that once people title their vehicles, that we may not see, obviously that's a one-time thing. So it's difficult to say. We'll have a complete full year coming up, so we might be able to have a little more of a baseline to make some kind of a determination of what the overall revenues are going to be, because obviously right now for all of us, this is a new thing to try to figure out what kind of revenues will be coming in.
So in short, we really don't know what, you don't know whether titling's paying its own way, and you're asking for money from stickers to keep both programs stable, or?
Well, it would be, right now, titling is helping the program. Again, we look at it from a collective, so we have the money from the titles, we have the percentage from the decals. We just want to make sure the program remains solvent so that we can pay our expenses. And
I believe I understand that. I was just trying to see where the overages compared to the income come from, and we'll get into it later. Thank you very much.
certainly.
Mr. Romo, did you have a question? I'm sorry. Just a quick housekeeping. Please remind everybody to turn their phones off. I had mine on, so I would know that it's asking everybody to turn them off. So please turn your cell phones off or put them on vibrate. I would sort of say that I understand the issue that DMV is going through, the shortage of money. There are some alternatives which are a little bit more palatable. I'm not speaking on behalf of Paul Jackson, not the commission, because we have not discussed or taken a vote. But there are some alternatives that are more palatable. And I would encourage your boss basically to, if he has another alternative, to come up with it, or we'll be happy to meet with him, a delegation from the commission, made up of probably myself, Mr. Lambert, and somebody else from the commission. We'll be happy to meet with him and discuss any alternatives. We are going to schedule this for discussion, possible action, in our March meeting, and to see if, we have several alternatives. We can put forward our own bill, which may change things completely. We can come up with some alternatives that we can offer to DMV, or we can discuss and put something together with DMV that everybody can agree on, and then go as a united front to the Assembly or the Senate, which obviously is preferable to all of us. So, are there any further questions from anybody? I'm sorry, Sheriff Lee, go ahead, sir.
Just a quick question. You say you have 3 full-time employees. Is that all they do is the OHV, or do they do other things when the OHV stuff slows down? Or are they full-time OHV?
This is Doreen Rigsby for the record. They're only OHV. They're categorized, and that's all the work they do, but they do their own work. They do their own sorting of the mail, stamping it in. They do the registrations, the title. They scan the work after it's finished. They do any correspondence if the paperwork is incorrect or they need additional information. So they are their own self-sufficient unit, and there's no one else that helps them, and they don't go to any other areas.
Thank you.
Do we have anything else? Okay, one sort of small point. You actually get copies of all of the emails, but I have noticed there's been sort of a slight increase in people who I can only describe as frustrated with the system. Again, I mean, I don't get any follow-ups on those, so I really don't know. But there have been some situations where people have been frustrated by the situation. So I would take note of that. We are seeing some of those things happen. And as we discussed on the phone last week, I'll make sure that you get all copies of anything. But a lot of it's some people basically coming up to me and saying, my ATV is 45 miles away from Vegas, and I can't get the VIN check done. Things like that. So, I mean, we are sort of dealing with those situations, so we'll try and deal with them one-on-one, obviously. Are there anything else from the commission?
Paul,
Oh, go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
If I can speak just a minute. I did bring extra business cards because on the agenda, it kind of worried me a little that you were saying there was some complaints.
Right.
The ones that we deal with are particularly with the titles or the registration. Anything that goes about the grant, we forward on, and we've seen an increase on the grant concerns. But we didn't see anything on inspections in that. But I am going to I'm going to hand out my business cards to each of you. If you get those complaints, you're welcome to give them to the customer. As the manager, I know how they work, so I can go out, find out what's going on, and together we can find out what's going on with the inspections.
I think that's a
So
terrific
that-
idea.
Because taking care of it after the fact doesn't help anybody get it resolved.
And
I think
certainly,
it's a terrific idea. Thank you.
and if you don't mind, I too want to just echo Doreen's sentiments. If anything does get to the commission or any concerns, by all means, please let us know, because we would like to have an opportunity to fix those ahead of time. And if there's any hiccups in the process, we want to make it right. So by all means, let us know.
Sheriff Lee?
Yeah, I'd kind of like to echo the chairman's remarks. I've also had several complaints, DMV related, and I know VIN inspections are a major difficulty. Coming from the law enforcement side, that has been one of the most difficult things. We can't get VIN inspections done, we can't get them registered. Some people don't have trailers to take them to dealers. Some law enforcement entities are too busy. So VIN inspections are a major problem. One of my employees sent their application in 3 separate times, all with different issues each time. We'd get one issue resolved and then go back and, so I know there's been a lot of back and forth. This was initially, and I think maybe things have probably streamlined a little better, but initially 3 go-arounds it took. I know some people are getting frustrated, so they're just throwing up their hands and saying, well, I guess if I get a ticket, I get a ticket. I don't want that to happen, because the program's not going to succeed if we don't have that working. So I'd love to have one of your cards. If we can make that happen, that'd be great, and maybe we can solve some. I know one of the things, and maybe you can answer. A couple of people told me on older ATVs that they have had for years, DMV was not issuing them titles, and said you don't get a title till it transfers to the next owner. Do you know what that would mean?
I can speak for that. Doreen Rigsby, for the record. If we don't show chain of ownership to an individual that has that vehicle, then we ask them to do attempt to notifies. We have a statement of fact, which can get them the title. But if there's no ownership, and we do hear that quite a few times as well, I bought this from Bob Smith that bought it from John Riley, so there's no chain of ownership. We'll ask them to go back to the owner they knew had the paperwork, or attempt to notify, and then we can get them a title. But if that chain's missing, it does become a little bit more complicated to get ownership documents. We do register, but we won't do the ownership until the chain of command, or chain of
Chain of
ownership.
custody, okay. And I know that's a big issue, because there's a lot of ATVs out there that were bought online or from your neighbor, and you move. Personally, I can tell you myself, that's been the case, and I would have not even the foggiest idea where to go look. And so that's what they're telling me is, well, they got it registered, they got their sticker, they got everything, but they don't get a title because it has to change into the next ownership, or they have to sell to somebody else, then all of a sudden you establish a chain. But as far as the law enforcement side of this, I hope that, to me, titling and that being able to track that vehicle through, for the law enforcement side of it is super, super important. So I hope we're trying to get as many titles as we can. That's a concern. That's a concern. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Elmo, you had a question?
Yeah, this is Commissioner Elmer. I'm trying to understand 3 full-time employees handling OHV. Can you give us a number, I guess, on the average right now, given it's a slower renewal period, on how many of these transactions we're seeing a day? I just did the math. If you take all the transactions, registration, titles, renewals, duplicates, divided by 180 coming from June or July 1st to now, it comes out to about 75 per person for those 3 employees a day, but that's obviously skewed because it doesn't include the time period prior to July 1st. But do you have any idea as to how many they're handling a day right now?
I didn't bring that, Doreen Rigsby for the record, I didn't bring that information with me, but we do collect it. In addition to typing the registrations, they may do the paperwork for the chain of ownership to do the titles. So they do process registration, titles, mail, scanning. So it's not just sitting typing just one thing, because the whole program runs off those three.
Right. I guess I'm just trying to understand their daily workload or the number of transactions they're receiving, new transactions they're receiving in a day in relation to having 3 full-time employees.
And what we've done with those three, and we've tried it with less, and then we tried it with a little bit more there at the end of that last fiscal year when we got all the big bubble that we had a few days backlogged. But we were able to go back down to 2, but 3 is the minimum that we've been able to run off of. But I can show you that information later on. I know that we pulled it apart to try to figure out how we're going to fund this after we continue to get only 15%. So we do have it. We've researched it. So.
And if I could also just add to that a little bit, excuse me, we'd have to base it too off the fact we have, I want to say 250 working days out of the year instead of, because obviously a standard work day, work week, and about 7 hours of true processing time. And, that factors in for holidays and stuff, but we'd be happy to get you those numbers, certainly.
Great, thank you.
You bet.
All right, and we're going to try and move along here. One last question from Mr. Lambert. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Joe will be next, yes.
Commissioner Giroux, for the record, I have one quick follow-up on Commissioner Lee's question on the titling. And what we've seen is we have some customers that have had, say, a quad or dirt bike for a long time, and now they're attempting to sell it, which in the state, it's easy, but we're so close to the border, anyone going into California, being that California is a title registration state, that's where we've had some problems. We've been trying at the dealership level to handle it for the people, but I could see their frustration, especially if they have no experience in, titling and, stuff that we've been doing for the last 35 years. But if there was a way that, that we could, somehow simplify it or at least, where you have ownership for a large period of time, whether it be a, simplified statement of facts, I am the true owner, I've owned it for X amount of time. I don't know if there's any way that we can investigate that, just to make it easier for the public to get it done. And I think once we get it in the system, it is easy. And I also want to add, we've had real good success with DMV, so.
Thank you.
And I mean, it's not been easy, but like I say, our titling has been like 99% of our stuff's gotten titled, so been phenomenal. So thank you.
And if I could just respond to it, and thank you very much. And I'm certainly all for trying to streamline the processes that much more. If for any reason it would actually, obviously brings more revenue too, which is, so I'm certainly, we can try to streamline our processes if we have to. In this next session, bring another BDR forth to try to true things up or clean things up a little bit. By all means, I'll do whatever we need to do to make things right.
Terrific. Mr. Lambert, last question.
Commissioner Lambert, for the record, I know that I've made the suggestion before to put the statement of facts document up on your website because it causes way too many phone calls. It would alleviate a great deal of the backlog. Its principles are laid out in revised statute, and I would appreciate that being posted up as it would benefit your revenues and the commission's revenues. It's just food for thought. Thank you.
Okay, did you have a question, Mr. McKay? No? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, all right, moving right along. Ms. McDonald, thank you. I'm going to move along to agenda item number 7 and hand it over to Mr. McDonald, Mr. Cox, who will give us the Treasurer's report, and we will take action on the proposed budgets. Mr. Cox.
Thank you. I passed out to the commissioners a balance sheet and a profit and loss statement for the past year ending December 31st. I'll just pass that. I don't want to go through it line by line, but you can see on the profit and loss statement that our ending balance of July 31st was $403,409.17. And we have received both two checks in January from the Department of Motor Vehicles. The first one was $13,481, the second one $15,543, as I stated earlier. So that our income is significantly lower going, at the start of the year. All the bills are paid. I do have detailed breakdowns by account if anyone wants to see that during a break or after the meeting. We have very few bills to pay. It's a quick read. So with that, I'd like to move on to the proposed budget. You will see that, as mandated by law, our beginning balance of $403,049.17 is our beginning balance. The proposed budget is broken down in front of you. Basically, $25,152 for admin cost, $77,000 for law enforcement grant expenses, $57,000 for public education grants, $2,067 for event expenses, $241,830, and that's 17 cents for trail grant expenses. So our total grant expenses, $377,897.17, with our admin costs make a balanced budget of $403,049.17.
I will take a motion on the proposed budget.
Commissioner Lambert, I motion we approve the budget.
Second. Is there a second?
Commissioner Jarrell, I'll second that.
Thank you, sir. All right. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Do you want to have discussion?
Oh, I'm sorry. Hey, I apologize. Yes, is there any discussion on the budget? Now, we will be, just so everybody knows, we will be going over the budget again tomorrow as to exactly how much money we've got to spend on each category. So Mr. Cox will keep us well apprised, I'm sure. Is there any other discussion?
Commissioner Jackson, can I ask one question?
Sir.
For clarification. Just curious, does the trails category under grant expenses, is that the catch-all for everything else of all the things that are in NRS 490 that we have to distribute, or we can distribute monies for outside of law enforcement and education? Trails is the designated term for
Correct.
everything? Okay. Thank you.
All right. Seeing no more questions, I will call for the vote. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 All opposed? The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Cox. And still keeping with Mr. Cox, I apologize. Approval of existing expenses. Mr. Cox.
At the present time, there is no existing expenses.
Well, we have the expenses for, we're sort of doing a pre-approval for what we've got here. If it would be okay with you, Mr. Cox, could I table number 8, and we'll do it late tomorrow, so it gives you a chance to get a copy of all the receipts?
Okay, that's fine.
All right, is that, anybody object to that? Okay, so table number 8 to 17.
I'm sorry, I did misspeak. We do have one existing expense. I think it's for $304 for the public accountants that helped me set up these books.
I'm talking more about the
I know.
cost of the rooms and all of that kind of good stuff.
I understand that,
Yes,
but that's one I forgot.
All right. All right. Seeing no objection, I'm going to go ahead with agenda item number 9, committee reports. We've already heard from the budget. Grants we're pretty much good on. Mr. Elmo, was there anything on outreach?
There is not. The only thing is, I think it would be best in the commission and the purpose if I resigned as chair and we elected somebody else as chair. I'd like to stay on the subcommittee, but it's just come down to time to organize meetings and that.
No problem. I'm going to move that to March's agenda. Please take note, Kathy. We are going to add an agenda item to repopulate the outreach committee.
So that's great. I can stay as chair until the March meeting. We can handle it then.
I'm sorry, Kathy's just catching. You good? I think. Kathy's brand new to us and is still catching up on this, and it is kind of a learning curve. So we're working well. All right, so that's going to be in March's meeting. Law Enforcement Sheriff Lee, does your committee have anything? No. All right, Legislative, which is myself. The legislature is not open right now, and there's nothing going on legislatively for us to talk about. Mapping, Mr. Lambert.
Mapping has made some steps forward with the BLM, but nothing's finalized and there's nothing hard to report today. Thank you.
Terrific, thank you. Executive Search Committee, we're going to revitalize the search committee later on in the agenda and populate it. So I will table that. All right. Unless there's seeing no objection, I'm going to move along to agenda item number 10.
Commissioner Jackson?
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Mr. Olin.
Can I just suggest maybe for that March agenda item, given that we have 2 new members to the commission, maybe we revisit all of the subcommittees and give them an opportunity to get on, or maybe go through each of the subcommittees, find out who's on it, designate that, and give them an opportunity to.
That's a capital idea, sir, and we'll do that. All right, without objection, I'm going to move on to agenda item number 10.